Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This
Today's meeting of the Health Committee. Members of the public may like to follow along at London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag #AssemblyHealth. Please can I remind all participants to silence your devices. The main items on our agenda today are discussions on violence and abuse against healthcare staff in London. However, we've got a few minor items of business first. So can I now ask our clerk, Hannah Barlow, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Assembly Member Wilson and Assembly Member Ahmad.
Thanks, Hannah. On to declarations of interest. Can we note the list of offices held by Assembly members? Note. Thank you. And can I ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interest in any specific items on today's agenda? No. Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January 2026 to be signed by me as Chair as a correct record? Thank you. On summary list of actions, can we note the completed and outstanding actions arising from previous meetings and the additional correspondence received? Thank you. Response to committee output. Can I ask committee to note the response received from the Mayor of London to committee's men's mental health report as attached at Appendix 1? Note. Thank you. And finally, we now are on to today's main item of business. Can I warmly welcome all of the guests that have joined us here today for our first panel. If start from the right, we've got Jason Killens, Chief Executive Officer from the London Ambulance Service. We've got Emily Jackson, Clinical Advisor and Paramedic, London Ambulance Service, Lisa Elliott, Director for London Royal College of Nursing, and Zabina Ratanzi, MBE, who is a retired nurse. So thank you all so much for taking the time to join us this morning. We really appreciate the time that you could give to us today to look into this. And I know through many of your organisations, it's something you've been raising with us for a while. So we have finally got there to try and cover this in more detail. Could I start, and perhaps I'll come first to you, Zabina, and work down the line and ask, why does violence occur against healthcare staff? And do you think it's a growing problem within the NHS in London?
Thank you, Chair. I think there are fundamentally three reasons why we've seen an increase in violence against healthcare staff, and I speak from a acute hospital care setting. I think it's following COVID, we had a rise in attendance, access to healthcare within the hospital. We have had I guess our patients frustrated with waiting times, particularly in ED, long waits. There is a societal change, in my opinion, where the patience and tolerance level is quite low, and therefore the threshold to get frustrated and angry kind of reaches up quite quickly. And I think that there are issues in terms of delivery of healthcare, which is also systematically problematic. So I think it's a melting pot, which is why there's been a rise in violence against healthcare workers.
Just to follow up on that, Zabina, because it seems really alien to me, is this as a shift in societal attitude. Could you say more about that society? What is that? Because it's still an alien concept to me that anyone thinks it would be acceptable to be aggressive to healthcare staff. So what is that change that has made it, I don't want to say acceptable, but more common?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose it's lived experience of myself and my colleagues where we have seen, I think, higher levels of frustration than we had done previously. I think that's what we've seen. We have also seen, as I said, the tolerance level is quite low. Now, there may be other reasons for it, and perhaps societal was not the right word to use, but it just seems that either the expectation is high and we are not able to deliver, but definitely we're seeing a lot of irritation and frustration at the coalface.
Thank you. And Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. So I think what we're seeing at the moment, I think to give some context, violence against nurses and aggression against nurses has always happened. But what we're seeing now is we know that there are always going to be individuals that are aggressive or will be malicious towards healthcare staff. But what we're seeing now is the impact, I think, of some of those frustrations bubbling over. So we know that people are waiting a long time to be seen. And if you're the patient or the relative sitting in an area that is inappropriate, that is not dignified, and you're waiting a long time to be seen, those frustrations bubble over. And nurses are the people that are there 24/7 at the bedside. So they are more likely to be at the receiving end of these frustrations. And nursing, let's not forget, is a female-dominated profession. 90% of nurses are female, so it's more likely to be women that are on the receiving end as well. The other thing that we're seeing is the impact of the pressures within mental health. So we know that mental health services are full. There are waits to get in. So the other thing you've got is people that are mentally unwell in an area that may not be the most appropriate for them, with nursing staff who are dealing with lots of patients, they're understaffed, and they're having to try and manage very difficult behaviours in an area that isn't suitable for that patient. So that's where we're getting the systematic impact is then being these frustrations and unwell patients, and nurses are at the receiving end of that.
Thanks. Lisa, is that kind of anecdotal, or is there any hard data that shows that nurses are falling foul to the abuse more often?
So we've seen inquiries into our service. So we can see that from 2020, we've had a 252% increase in inquiries into the RCN about nurses that have been either verbally or physically abused. And I think it's important to say that when we're talking about that, we're talking about nurses that have been punched, have been kicked, have been spat at, have been strangled, have been verbally abused and emotionally abused. And we can see that happening. Now, there is underreporting. We know there's underreporting of these incidents happening within healthcare, and it's across all settings as well. So it's nurses that are in emergency departments, but also on wards, out in the community where nurses are working on their own, they're lone workers, and in GP practices as well. So we're seeing it across those, but we know these incidents aren't reported as often as they're happening, partly because nurses don't trust that anything's going to happen, that they're going to report the incident and that nothing happens. That's what they're seeing, that's what their perception is. And we know that there's no real national oversight to violence and aggression incidents as well. And also that nurses are just accepting, especially older nurses, that it's just part of the job, that you know, being abused and being at the receiving end of violence and aggression is just part of the role. And it's becoming much more normalised.
Thanks. And then we'll come on to those after bits a bit later. Emily, the same question to you again. That's about what is causing the violence and whether you think it's a growing problem in the NHS in London.
I don't know much about why it's becoming worse, because obviously I'm on the ambulance and I don't kind of see the overall statistics. But so I've been in ambulance services for 11 years now, and it's always been a problem. Like, there's been abuse and assaults, you know, in my career kind of since the first year that I joined. But in kind of the past few years, maybe 3 or so years, it's definitely like significantly increased in my lived experience. I don't know why, because obviously I understand the frustrations with people waiting, but it isn't always people that have waited a long time for us. So I'm not sure why, but it's definitely getting worse.
And is that clearly in the ambulance service? Like, if you're is that more family and friends that are doing the violence? I'd imagine if you're coming in an ambulance, is the patient able to be, or is it the patient being violent?
It can definitely be both. I'd say my worst one, kind of, I'm happy to tell the story. My worst one was a patient. So he was, we were called to him because he was unconscious, having taken some drugs and alcohol, and he was in a pub. We got to him very quickly. We were concerned about him. He wasn't breathing particularly well when we got there. When the drugs kind of started to wear off after a few minutes, he regained consciousness, and at first he was fine and everything was calm. But after a few minutes, he got really angry. He stood up, he was swearing at us, threatening us, making sexual remarks to myself. He started trying to fight people in the pub, so he was like throwing punches, and I got struck kind of just below my eye. And then he eventually left the pub, came back after a few minutes, and then kind of sat down, started drinking again, and then basically threatened to rape me and dump my body in an alleyway. He obviously ended up getting arrested, and he did get prosecuted. But he was obviously a critically unwell patient originally, and then became very violent. So,
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm really pleased to hear he did get prosecuted, but sorry that you had to go through that before that anyway. Thanks, Emily. And Jason, the same question to you.
Thank you, Chair, and Emily, for turning my microphone on. I think there are 3 or 4 reasons that I would say we continue to see a rise in violence and aggression towards ambulance workers, and they very much follow the themes from colleagues at the other end of the table. So I think drugs and alcohol are a growing phenomenon for us, if you like. We see that drugs and alcohol being present in violence and aggression frequently. We see some frustration coming through with delays in accessing services or patients or service users' inability to access health services in other ways. There's definitely something about society, our communities respecting public sector workers less than they historically did. So I joined the ambulance sector 30 years ago in '96. And I've worked in 3 different services since then, and I can definitely see a reduction in how the public respect or respond to public sector workers, to uniform workers. So there's definitely a trend there. And then I think I'd underscore the point that was made earlier by Lisa about mental health. We've seen a 90% increase in patients accessing our service who are categorised as in need of mental health services of some description, and of course many of those patients are vulnerable and also unpredictable, and we see mental health being a feature in violence and aggression against our people quite frequently. And before I give way, Chair, to give you a sense of the kind of scale of this for us in London and nationally across the UK. So in 2024, the latest full year that we've got staff survey results for in the LAS, 53% of our people reported that they've been subject to some kind of violence and aggression in the workplace in the previous 12 months. And we know that that's underreported, as colleagues at the other end of the table have said, quite significantly underreported from the contact we have from our colleagues. And then if you look at the ambulance sector across the UK, so this is true in London too. In the last year, there was a 15% rise in cases of violence and aggression. You break those numbers down, essentially there's an ambulance worker somewhere in the UK being assaulted every 20 minutes. And that will be a trend that we see here too. So it's a significant challenge for us.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to pass over to Assembly Member Russell. Oh, no, I'm going to ask that. Okay, sorry, I thought you wanted to come in on this. Just want to come to the Right Care, Right Person initiative and how you think that has affected your service, both for nurses and in the ambulance. Did anyone want to go first?
So I'll start, Chair, if I can, from an ambulance service perspective. I think the first thing to say is that whilst Right Care, Right Person, has brought with it some operational challenges for us and an increase in activity, it's part of that reason that we've seen a 90% increase in mental health presentations. It is the right thing to do because these are patients in need of healthcare services, not enforcement. I do believe it is the right thing to do. We've responded to that as a service, and our commissioners have, by putting on additional mental health specific responses. So we've recruited mental health practitioners into our remote clinical advisory setting and also into to providing responses on the streets. We've got specialist paramedics now being trained in mental health for the first time ever. So we've got different services now that we're providing as a result of that increase in activity. It has led to more mental health presentations coming our way, but I do believe it's the right thing to do because they are, after all, patients that need healthcare services.
But Jason, in there, has it become too siloed? Because it's almost like, well, then that's a mental health patient case, so that's for the NHS or the ambulance service. But actually, what it really needs is an NHS lead with a police support. But it's almost like, no, it's an ambulance problem, so they'll go. And perhaps there's a conversely that have cases where they should be leading with ambulance or NHS services there to support.
I mean, look, we could all cite cases where it hasn't gone as well as it could or should. Because, this is quite a complex area. Mental health services in themselves are under strain, not easy to access, and therefore that means that more emergency services pick up some of that work or some of that activity. I wouldn't necessarily point the finger at policing or one particular part of the system. I think what I would say is that there is work for us all to do, mental health services, commissioners, police, and other public sector services, to make it easier for us to respond to and manage patients presenting with mental health crisis, particularly in the out of hours period. That is when it is most problematic. And so there is definitely work for us to do, but I wouldn't say it's a policing or an enforcement issue. And certainly in the majority of cases, when we do need police backup, where our clinicians on the streets need police backup, in the majority of cases they will get it, and very quickly.
Thank you. Lisa, Zabina, or Emily, anything that you wanted? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We certainly understand the rationale for why this policy and this change in working happened. What we are hearing from our members is they felt that it came in very quickly. It was quite rushed without that real assessment of the impact that this was going to have on services, particularly in ED as well. So what we're seeing really is that the problem hasn't been solved. We haven't dealt with the root cause of this issue. The problem's been moved. So we are seeing the impact happening. We are seeing it both in community and within ED. So community nurses are feeling that those welfare checks that used to happen by the police aren't able to access that. But we haven't got the staffing levels. They haven't improved in the community for it be able for community nurses to pick that up. So we do feel that patients are then falling through the cracks. And we're certainly hearing that from our members. We also know that ED is being used as a place of safety, but these EDs are extremely busy. And if you're a very unwell person, actually putting someone there within an ED department may not be, although it may be better than where they were, putting them there and then leaving them to the nursing staff to manage and deal with some extremes and difficult and unpredictable behaviours is actually very difficult. And we know that mental health services are under pressure, so that person may be in that ED department for a while. So what we'd like to see is a review of the impact that bringing this policy has had from the perspective of that more broader impact into other areas of healthcare, because we are hearing from nursing staff that it has had a significant impact on them and their ability to provide care.
Thanks. Can I just double check this ED emergency department?
Sorry, yes, it is. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Thanks. Sabina?
Yes, thank you. So completely agree with Jason. Police cells are not the right place for mental health patients, but neither is ED as emergency department, as Lisa has explained. And I think what has happened is an issue and a problem has been shifted further down the line, and that is all that has happened. In fact, what is really needed is a review of mental health services and in-reach to be able to manage these people appropriately in an appropriate space. ED may be the right place if we create a space with mental health colleagues in there supporting these people. But at the moment, it is just moving one problem from here to there, and I think that is why the review is needed.
Thank you. Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you. The Police and Crime Committee actually looked at right care, right person service when all the changes were happening, and a lot of what you have described today was absolutely what was predicted, and it's sad to hear that there hasn't been the appropriate investment in support so that people are, nurses in emergency departments aren't handling people who really shouldn't be in that scenario. But the question I wanted to ask was, we heard about they were going to be rebranding some of your vehicles so that people don't turn up in the kind of Battenberg kind of emergency vehicles. And I just wondered if that has happened and if that's working well.
It has happened, which is good news. So there are two types of, let me describe them as specialist mental health response. So there are, in some locations across London, there are what we call joint mental health response cars. So that's a car, not a big emergency ambulance. In those vehicles, there are two people. There's one of our people, and there's a mental health clinician provided by the NHS, and so they operate in some areas of London. And we've also got what we call mental health response ambulances. So these aren't big yellow ambulances. They're a smaller vehicle. They're a Vito van, if you're familiar with that. And they respond to assess and sometimes convey, dependent on the presentation of the patient, with clinicians from our service too. So yet there are two types of different dedicated mental health response across the capital now. In addition to that, we've also got mental health clinicians who work in our remote clinical settings, so in our contact centres, in our control rooms, what we call our clinical hub, where we have paramedics and some nurses, and now we've got some mental health practitioners, and we're investing in that further in the next financial year. So we'll be growing the number of remote mental health clinicians because we know that about 40% of cases that contact us through the 999 service are able to be resolved remotely with advice from a specialist, pointing them into or accessing community services which they otherwise couldn't get. So we're seeking to manage safely as many mental health presentations as we can remotely without responding to scene. And then when we do need to respond, we've got two separate specialist types of mental health response.
Thank you. That's really good to hear that update. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Harani.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask my question to Lisa, but Zabina, feel free to come in afterwards as well, because I think you might have some information to add as well. So are there any particular groups that are experiencing violence and abuse at higher levels compared to others in the NHS?
Thank you. So as I've already said, nursing is 90% female, so we know that the majority of this is directed towards women. We also did an employment survey of our members, and actually what we had there was, of the respondents, 44% of them were Black or Asian nurses reporting that they had been exposed to violence and aggression. And I think quite worryingly within that, the descriptions they gave of the verbal and physical abuse they felt had a link to their ethnicity. And we've heard some really quite harrowing examples and accounts of the violent behaviour that they've been exposed to, and feeling like they didn't have sufficient support as well when these incidents happened. So that is what we're hearing at the moment.
Okay. Zabina?
Yeah, I'll just give you an example. One of the matrons where I was working, her heritage is Afro-Caribbean. And in our morning huddle, I was saying, we must report any incidents of such kind on our DATEX system, which is our reporting system, so that we have evidence, and then we can kind of look at that and work out what is the, what are the kind of training opportunities that we can offer. And this matron said, and also I said, we must report to the police as well. And this matron said, it's all very well for you to say that, but I'm a black person and reporting to police is quite scary for me. And until then, I hadn't quite appreciated what it must be like for people who have, historically or culturally had that impression. And so we as a hospital had to work with our staff members to kind of make sure that they feel safe, to report on our internal system, but also to report to the police, and we would get them a buddy if that is what is required. So I think some of this is quite real for people, and I think they are sometimes worried about reporting, I think.
Lisa.
Can I just come back and say that actually what we're hearing as well is that it's our internationally educated nurses, so those nurses that we have recruited from outside of the UK and who are now coming to the UK and working for us. We're actually hearing that those are the nurses that are quite significantly impacted by these episodes and events of violence and aggression as well. So I just wanted to add that in. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any insight as to why in particular?
We don't. And obviously the underreporting makes it even more difficult to actually understand the root causes. We are seeing, I suppose, the impact of that sort of anti-migrant rhetoric that we're hearing. And I think, that's a societal thing, but it obviously is going to be influencing the behaviours that are happening within the NHS and to healthcare staff.
Just on that anti-migrant sentiment that you mentioned. So in recent years, obviously, immigration has featured a lot more in the national debate as well. And in August 2024, obviously, we had riots in towns and cities across the country. Do you feel there's been a difference in sort of tone or numbers of reported incidents since then?
We're certainly hearing anecdotally that that's the impact. I can't give you numbers around incidents because, as I say, I don't think these incidents are always being reported, but certainly anecdotally what we're hearing from our members is that they believe that impact of that within both acute and community settings.
Okay, Jason, you're nodding.
Yes, thank you. I agree. I mean, I think there's definitely been a shift in tone, to your point, since 2024, and kind of connected to the anti-migrant sentiment. I mean, if I return to the beginning of your question about kind of frequency, what the NHS staff survey tells us is that ambulance workers are twice as likely to be assaulted at work compared to the rest of the NHS. What I would just put as a caveat on that, as we were discussing outside earlier, is that for certain settings in the wider NHS, that will be higher. So for argument's sake, colleagues in community, in ED, emergency departments, and in some other settings, they will likely see a higher prevalence of violence and aggression. And therefore, if you had disaggregated the rest of the NHS, you would see variation in frequency for some staff groups. The other thing to say, which may be helpful by way of background, is that staff survey also tells us that under-reporting, just over a quarter of people say to us that they haven't bothered reporting an episode of violence and aggression for reasons similar to those which have been described by colleagues earlier. So, under-reporting is a significant issue for us for a range of reasons.
And just a question, really. Obviously, we mentioned ethnic minorities as a group that do, from the data that you've suggested, experience violence and abuse more. Do you have any feedback from LGBTQ plus groups as well? Definitely, and that's an area which I've scribbled down as colleagues were talking earlier. So we see, we do see racially aggravated violence and/or aggression, and we do also see abuse related to other protected characteristics, such as towards those colleagues from the LGBTQ plus community. Yeah. Okay. Others? Lisa, Sabina, do you have any feedback from the LGBTQ plus?
From a hospital perspective, no, there isn't any obvious increase in LGBTQ community, but we have seen the kind of racial abuse rise.
Okay. Lisa, anything to add on that?
No, we haven't. That hasn't been something that's been coming through. But again, I think the challenge that we have is with the data that we have, because there is a reluctance to report, which I think makes it more challenging.
Right. And Jason, I think you've answered this question already. So it's on sort of why ambulance staff experience more violence in the NHS. So I got down when you answered drugs, prevalence of drug and alcohol issues, public sector worker being respected less, and mental health and dealing with mental health incidents as well. Do you have anything more to add to that?
So the fourth area, which I touched on earlier in response to the Chair's question, was around access, so frustration with accessing healthcare services. Of course, the other thing to say about our setting, in the pre-hospital environment, it is less controlled. Yeah, so it is, it's spontaneous. People are either the patient or those around them, are often affected by the adrenaline that's running through them in response to the incident that they've been involved with or witnessed. And whilst that's not an excuse, it certainly would contribute to the cases that we see.
Thanks, Jason. Assembly Member Russell.
So this is about reporting structures, and Lisa, right at the back at the very beginning, you mentioned underreporting, and it's been a bit of a thread going through the meeting, and also that sense that nurses not trusting that anything will happen as a result of reporting, we know that the data that we've been shown suggests that there's 6 in 10 of the people that do report abuse did not express satisfaction with the response. So that's more than half not satisfied with their response. And the RCN stating that a common response received was that reports of abuse are often swept under the carpet, which reinforces perceptions of organisational indifference and a lack of accountability. So it does feel like there's a real need to try and get to grips with this issue of reporting and making sure that there is an institutional response that builds people's trust that they are going to be taken seriously when they report things, because the kind of abuse that you've all been describing is absolutely unacceptable. And the idea that people are physically violent and even just verbally abusive to people who are working so hard to help keep them well and safe, and get them to a place of safety, if it's the ambulance service, is just absolutely mind-boggling. Although you've given very good reasons why people are frustrated with the state of the health service and the long waits and everything else. So, yeah, we kind of understand why people might be lashing out, but it's really not fair on the staff who are on the receiving end of that. So, do you think that there is anything specific that could be done to improve the reporting structures that would help improve confidence? I mean, several of you have said you don't have very much data, you don't have much in the way of numbers. Do you think that there should be more reporting, for example, of the stats around the reporting of abuse? Lisa, did you want to? You were nodding.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you summarised that really well there. There is a lack of trust at the moment. So the majority of NHS trusts and healthcare providers will use a system called Datex, which is how you can report an incident, but that's all incidents. And then there should be a process of that incident being investigated and acted upon. What nurses are seeing and what we're being told is there is a perception of a lack of action when those incidents are reported. it feels like it goes into a black hole and is never seen again. So there is something about how these incidents are reported in a way that nurses can then see that action is being taken. I think the other thing is there's no national oversight of this. There's no way of being able to see how trusts are dealing with at a national level those incidents that are reported. So we don't have that reporting structure there to be able to see those incidents are being reported. And as you can hear, senior leaders do want to encourage that reporting. They do want to understand what's happening to their nursing staff that are providing those frontline services. But we do need to then build a level of trusting so that nurses know when it happens that it's going to be taken seriously and it's going to be acted upon. And one of the things that we heard from one nurse, who gave us an account, who said that the NHS talks about having a zero tolerance, but actually they feel like most of the time they're encouraged to sort of put up with it because it comes as part of the role. It's so common and so frequent that they're just asked to, pull up with it. It's almost expected and normalised as part of that nursing role that this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So you say are you saying that there needs to be more oversight of the NHS trusts so that they are held accountable for the way that abuse is reported and then dealt with and managed afterwards?
Well, I think at the moment there isn't any oversight of at that level. So, and again, there's no way of being consistent. So there's trusts out there they're doing things in different ways. So how do we actually identify that really good practice? How do we actually share that learning? So we don't have a national level of oversight and accountability of trusts.
Thank you. Jason.
Thank you. Just a few points from our sector that may be helpful here. So Emily might want to comment actually on the kind of ease of reporting and how practical and straightforward it is for clinicians to do that. But if I just talk about some of the things that we have done to encourage colleagues to report. So you may well have seen, committee members may well have seen a campaign that we ran publicly in the run-up to Christmas with the tagline, "All we want for Christmas is respect." Emily, you fronted that with me, didn't you, on the GMTV sofa and in other places. But it got quite a lot of traction. The reason I draw it out is because we've surveyed our staff since then. And what they said to us, 77% of respondents said to us that they felt the campaign showed that we were taking the issue seriously. And of the respondents also, 64% felt that they would be more likely to report an incident of violence and aggression on the back of the fact that we'd run that campaign. And it's not the first time we've run a campaign as an organisation against violence and aggression, but this is clearly something we need to continue to do and not take our eye off the ball with. So I think that's quite encouraging that because we've gone big. And
that was for the ambulance service.
It was, yeah. We've fronted the issue. 2/3 of staff felt more likely to report that they would report an incident of violence and aggression afterwards. Other things we've done, we've got dedicated violence reduction unit in the organisation with staff focused on supporting colleagues who do need to go through the court system when they are regrettably assaulted. All of our clinicians, all of our vehicles carry DNA collection, DNA evidence collection kits. So this is when people get spat at, we can collect the DNA evidence to support prosecution. We've invested over $3 million in things like body-worn cameras and all those kind of things.
I think we're coming into violence at the next later on, so I don't want to tread on other people's questions. I won't tread on colleagues' toes,
but the reason I raise it now is because it's all about showing our people we're serious about this, and therefore encouraging them to report more. But Emily, I don't know if you want to talk about the practicality of reporting in our service.
That'd be great. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I've already kind of shared one of my experiences, and I would say from an employer perspective, everything was fantastic. The support that I had afterwards was amazing. Managers and higher managers were actively pushing with the police to push things forward. And obviously we did get a conviction, which was really good. But I do remember during this whole process, my colleagues were very kind of negative about it. They were saying there's no point because nothing will come of it. And I completely get why they said that, because in my 11 years, the amount of assaults I've had, this is my only conviction. And that includes a woman that tried to stab me and was like very close to stabbing me. The only reason she didn't is that her adult son caught her arm and prevented that. I got £50 compensation over 3 months for that one. That was a few years ago. But it's kind of one of those ones that if you keep getting pushed back and things just kind of, like people have said already, things get kind of swept under. It feels like I have all of the support of my employer, but then we kind of stagnate potentially at the court system, where things aren't being prosecuted. It can sometimes feel like putting on the uniform, you're expected to have this kind of extra level of, like you've said already, just getting on with it. So my employer doesn't make me feel like that, but it does feel like if I was a member of the public that someone tried to stab, it feels like it might have been taken a bit more seriously. But because I've got that uniform and I'm going into this very vulnerable situation, it does feel like it can kind of get like, oh, it's part of the job. But it's not part of the job. I'm just a girl.
Yeah, it really isn't part of the job.
It
really shouldn't be part of the job.
I think that's part of the issue with the reporting, is it can be a lot of effort to report, and it's worth it if something comes of it. But actually, if it keeps getting kind of brushed off, it becomes not worth it.
Yeah. So getting people, so the way to get more people to feel it's worth reporting is if there's more criminal justice outcomes.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to share my story as part of this campaign, because I wanted people to see that this happened. He got 8 months in prison, which I felt was a good sentence, considering I expected nothing. But during this campaign, I had a lot of colleagues from both London and outside of London. I had people emailing me and messaging me on social media to say how much they were appreciating that this was being spoken about, not just as an ambulance perspective, but also just as, like being a woman who's been through this kind of sexual, horrible situation, because we do find it very embarrassing and humiliating. And people were really appreciative that we were representing that, and really speaking up about the situation. So it has had a very positive impact that people have kind of approached me about.
Thank you. It sounds like, more of those campaigns seems like a really sort of good thing. Sabina, is that in the sort of nursing side, do you feel like there's the same level of public sort of advocacy on behalf of nursing staff?
Thank you. I think, in a way, nurses are slightly better treated compared to my colleagues over there, in the majority of cases. But as we've already said, in terms of emergency department, some people with mental health, some dementia patients, it's not within their capacity to understand what they're doing. So the impact of violence against nurses is in that manner. But if I may, in terms of hospitals, so there are policies. We have you've already mentioned the zero tolerance policy. We have, the DATEX reporting system. And they are, each hospital or each trust will have some processes in how this is managed, how this is articulated, and how the executives kind of have the information to do something about it. There's some training courses in terms of conflict resolution, trauma-informed risk management, and so on and so forth. But the reporting itself still is perplexing in that actually nurses wanting to report again, that perception that you described is, well, nothing will happen, because actually the individual is not charged, the individual is not punished, and therefore nothing will happen. And in healthcare, sometimes this is really problematic. You know, what are you going to do with a mental health patient or a dementia patient? You're not going to charge them because they are, you know, unwell people.
Yeah.
So what is the wraparound for the individual member of staff? That is where, you know, the focus needs to be. Lisa has already said there isn't a national framework, and I think that becomes important, so that we're all comparing like for like, and then looking at what is the learning and what are the interventions needed. Bodycam camera are worn in our emergency department, so that is part of what we have learned from the ambulance services as well.
Thank you. So it sounds like, yes, there's a need for more scrutiny of the trusts in terms of the wraparound support that nurses get, because actually a criminal justice pathway is inappropriate when it comes to dementia patients or people who don't have capacity and are causing harm, but those staff still need absolute support and protection. And in terms of the ambulance service, it's the real benefit of that public engagement and reaching out to try and deal with the kind of poor behaviour from people who actually could behave better, but
I think that's right. I think that's right. If I could just add to that, I mean, our people, our clinicians, you know, will recognise the fact that, you know, when someone is, you know, lacks capacity or is mentally unwell, that they won't expect a prosecution, because, you know, we recognise that, you know, our clinicians will recognise that that wouldn't be appropriate. But I think, just building on the point that colleagues have made, is that when there is an overt, deliberate, you know, act of violence and aggression, what our people expect is the criminal justice system to step up and support them as public sector workers and prosecute and use the full extent of the sentencing powers which exist. And I think all too often, and I say this as an ex-magistrate of 2 decades, what we don't see is the full extent of the powers available at sentence being used. And it's rare that we see custodial sentences. And what our people expect is firm, swift justice when they are assaulted in the service of our communities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Assembly colleagues, could we just give a quick hello to the Barts Health NHS Trust Education Academy who join us today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chamber here. Jason, you were just picked up actually on the point I wanted to get to around the sentencing. And obviously back in 2022, the Police Crime Sentencing Act literally attempted to put a red line on, say, you know, attacks on NHS workers aren't acceptable and extend those sentences. But it sounds like in practice that hasn't happened. And why?
I think that would be a fair assessment, Chair. Certainly in our experience, that hasn't happened. I mean, that legislation, as you set out, makes it a specific aggravating feature of a sentencing decision when an emergency service worker is assaulted in the execution of their duty. And whilst I appreciate that all of the circumstances of an individual case need to be taken into account, when you look at the facts of some of these cases of assault, particularly physical assault, and particularly where there are other aggravating features such as race or abuse against other protected characteristics, what we don't see is what I would describe as proportionate sentencing. And certainly our colleagues, our clinicians, our frontline clinicians don't feel that they're getting the appropriate justice that they deserve.
Thanks. And my second follow-up, well, I'd really like to know why that's not happening. That would be, but I don't think you're the right person I can question on that, but it really certainly isn't good enough. But the second point I wanted to raise with you is, do you think, you spoke about the people that don't have the capacity. To my mind, is that line drawn in the right place? Because your healthcare workers, to all degree, people coming to you are incapacitated to some degree. whether that be mentally or physically, but reason does not equal excuse. And is that line drawn in the right place at this time?
It's a great question, Chair. I mean, I'm hesitating because I think it's a matter of judgment about where the line is drawn in each of these cases, particularly where you've got a lack of capacity for a patient or a pre-existing, mental health condition. I'm looking at clinical colleagues down the table. So I think it is a matter of judgment. What is much clearer is where there isn't an issue of capacity or where there isn't an issue of mental health diagnosis, and we've got our people being, abused or assaulted. So I think that is much clearer and much more straightforward. We would never say never. We wouldn't routinely seek prosecution of someone who lacks capacity, but it would depend on the circumstances. I think I could see scenarios where we might, but these are difficult cases, often with lots of other kind of features at the scene that need to be taken into account that are difficult. I think to say it's this or that. I don't know what colleagues would feel about that, but I think it's difficult.
Thank you. And again, I do think it's a great question. I think it's less around the line in the sand and more about the fact that where a patient doesn't have capacity, and I can certainly think over my 30-year career as a nurse around having to deal and manage with some very difficult patients, but it's more around where these incidents are happening and the support that's in place. So if you've got a patient in the wrong area, that is short-staffed, so there isn't enough nursing staff. You might have a mental health patient. We certainly have many CAMHS patients, so children that have mental health issues being placed on paediatric wards rather than specialist CAMHS units. So you've got nurses that may not have the right level of training in order to be able to deal with some very challenging behaviours. That's when these kind of things have exacerbated. So I think it's less about the line in the sand and understanding the context of where these things are happening. But certainly if the patient's got capacity, I think that's a very easy judgment to make. I think it's when you're talking about people that don't have capacity and whether we're able to actually put the patient in the best place to be able to support them with nursing staff that really have been trained and understand, and there's enough nursing staff to be able to manage and support those behaviours.
Sorry, did you want to add something?
Thank you. In terms of line in the sand, I think in emergency department it's a little bit more difficult. You're still doing assessment and diagnostics. But if they have been admitted, then you know what the admission criteria has been, what the diagnosis has been, and it is. And we do mental health assessment checks anyway, capacity checks, and therefore at that point in time it is a little bit more clearer who has capacity and who doesn't have capacity.
Thanks. And a final question on reporting. When an individual presents at an emergency department and has become violent, are they flagged? And equally, if there's an address that you've gone to and the family or the patient's been violent, is that also flagged so that healthcare workers know that there's been previous issues? I don't know. To take that first.
So from our perspective, Chair, yes, we do have a flagging system on our computer-aided dispatch, the system we use to respond to patients. Of course, as you touched on, it's based on address rather than a person. So if we've got history, if we've got evidence and previous history of violence in a particular location, then that address can be flagged. But what we can't do is obviously flag a person because they could pop up anywhere.
And does something different happen when that call comes in?
So there'll be what we describe as a dynamic risk assessment. The responding crew will undertake a dynamic risk assessment. The information will be passed from the control room out to the clinicians in the ambulance. What they know will be shared, and then there'll be a judgment made about whether they respond on their own or whether they hold back and wait for police backup.
Thank you. And Zabina?
So in emergency department, it will be noted in the patient's notes. But normally it's not flagged for the next time unless the yellow-red card policy has been used, and then it would be flagged if the patient has received a yellow card or red card.
Thanks. And again, in the similar question, so what if that yellow card, red card comes up, or the note, is there something different that happens in the procedure?
Yes, so the yellow card basically alerts the healthcare worker to be mindful, and also that the patient or the patient's family is aware that they have received a yellow card, so they will be treated for emergency cases only. If it is a red card, then actually they're advised not to come to this hospital unless it is absolutely an emergency situation. Otherwise, they are transferred to another hospital, knowing that they have received a red card. In my 10 years as in one of the hospitals, I've never seen that happen, though, in reality.
I've got so many more follow-up questions on that, but I think I'll digress. So, Assemblymember Boff.
You're not the only one, actually, because I did find that exchange very interesting. I just wondered what the effect is on NHS staff of the violence, and what effect is it on them? So, Miss Elliott, perhaps.
Thank you. So I think it's twofold. It's first of all the impact on the individual themselves. So I think just to give you some examples, unfortunately I've got quite a few examples in front of me. But to give you one, an A&E sister who was in the waiting room was punched in the face and knocked unconscious. Because of that incident, she's been particularly traumatised, has taken months off sick, has developed PTSD and anxiety. And we're hearing this a lot, that impact of the trauma from being either verbally or physically abused. So another nurse who was also punched in the face, had to be in A&E overnight, then off sick again for several months, and again really traumatised. I've got an example of a community nurse who was actually, as I've said before, they're lone workers, they're going into people's houses on their own, was actually attacked by the patient's dog and was traumatised by that. So there's the impact of the individual. I think there's also then the individual on the nursing team, because you're going into work on alert. You're aware that these incidents can potentially happen. So you've always got that awareness that it could happen to you. So when you've seen it happen to colleagues, when you're aware that it's happened on the shift before, it really does impact morale and that heightened awareness that it could happen to you. So I think it's twofold. It's that, first of all, it's that significant impact it has on that individual nurse who's been attacked, but also then the ripple effect that it will have on the team as well.
And Ms. Ratansi, what about yourself? What effects have you seen on the staff themselves as a result of being attacked?
It's similar to what Lisa has said, is fear of coming back to work, fear of letting colleagues down as well for being off sick, and so I would say there's a bit of a split. For the older nurses, they'll kind of just get on with it because we have to. For the more new nurses into profession, I think this is much more problematic, and they're more likely to go off sick. They're more likely to ask for help and support and well-being support, counselling support, and things like that. And in some cases, they may reassess whether this is the right profession for them. So the impact, it kind of varies quite a bit.
So is there an economic impact on the NHS?
Yes, there is. Lisa has some data.
Lucilla, sorry.
Yes, so I'm just trying to find my numbers here in front of me, because we did actually, there was a report recently. Oh, there it is, right in front of me. So, yeah, there was a report done in 2020 and 2021, which saw that sickness absence cost around £600 million. The overall cost to NHS staff in response to violence and aggression was approximately £1.36 billion in 2020 to 2021. So they looked at the impact for sickness absence, employee turnover, and also diminished productivity as well. So a really significant economic impact to the NHS from these incidents.
Is there I don't know if this is covered. I just thought if I'm trampling, tell me not to. But is there any kind of specialist unit for supporting NHS staff? The police have a thing called the Met Police have a thing called Operation Hampshire, which is there just to look after those people who've been attacked or suffered violent abuse. I'm sorry, have I trampled?
A little bit.
Is it all right? Sorry, it's just a bit tangent. I was going on. Apparently, I can ask that. Yes, sorry. I beg your pardon.
Yes, there is. And certainly after COVID, there's been investment in staff health and well-being support. And so hospitals will have counselling services, health and well-being practitioners. Some hospitals will try and move the staff away from that ward or that area into another clinical area.
But it exists as a policy or a body. It exists.
Health and well-being team exists in most hospitals.
Okay. And what about the London Ambulance Services?
I'll start with your question about impact, if I could, and then return
please,
to kind of support to colleagues. And Emily might want to talk about the impact on her specifically. But you know, when I talk to staff and I hear their stories, we have to remember, as Emily mentioned, that behind the uniform is someone's son, daughter, brother, mum, dad, whatever it is, your people in our communities. And the impact is quite profound from some of these cases. These are rare, but they do occur where colleagues are unable to return to work as a result of the assault that they've suffered in the workplace. And that can be either through the physical injury or often because of the psychological trauma, the confidence loss that occurs as a result of that episode of violence and aggression. So the personal impact on the individual that is subject to the violence and aggression is profound. There is a corporate impact, as colleagues have touched on. There's a cost consequence. There's an ability to respond to other patients' consequence because the ambulance isn't immediately available or a colleague is off sick for a number of weeks or months. So there is a financial impact too. But the bigger issue for me certainly is the individual impact where colleagues lose confidence, are unable to return to work as a result of that. When they do return to work, if they've been off for a long period of time, they need to go through retraining because they've been off for so long. So there's a long-term kind of consequence for the individual. In terms of support, I mentioned earlier the dedicated violence reduction unit we've got. We've also got wellbeing service that exists. The ambulance service charity nationally supports colleagues too. So there's a range of options available to support colleagues once they are assaulted. But of course, by then it's too late. We should be in the prevention space, not the response space. Is where we're trying to kind of move to.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll hand back to the chair so that question can be asked again, because sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you. And just to follow up, Lisa, you gave 1.3 billion was the number, which is a crazy amount, obviously. And I suppose the argument that naturally follows then is only a small proportion of that in preventative spending would be a great save to the NHS overall. Is that part of that report, or where you've got those numbers for? Is there something more you're asking, or an area where you're asking money to be spent on perhaps helping improve violence? Or is it just more staff and better NHS resources?
I think what we're seeing is the systematic challenges that we currently have is resulting in these frustrations being resulting in violence and aggression towards nursing staff. So if people are having to wait a long time, if there aren't enough nurses, if they're laying it in a trolley in a corridor or sitting for 72 hours in a chair, all of that results in a poor experience, increasing like a pressure keg. You know, we're just seeing the impact. So I think there is definitely something about preventing people needing to come into hospital in the first place, having really good primary care, community care, preventative happening. We know the impact of social care and not being able to discharge people out of hospital in a timely way, meaning that hospitals are extremely busy. So I think, you know, where we'd want to see that focus on is ensuring that we've got safe nursing numbers, we're able to provide safe care with the right numbers of nurses, and that we are focusing on trying to stop people getting unwell and needing to come into hospital in the first place, and then having adequate access to primary care so that people don't then turn up to ED because they can't access their own GP and GP nurses.
Thank you. Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you. We've sort of covered a bit of this, but this is sort of just wrapping up anything that you haven't yet answered on NHS policies. So there's the NHS England Violence Prevention Reduction Policy. There's a NHS England Sexual Safety Charter. There's also the NHS England National Sexual Misconduct People Policy Framework. And then there's the work the ambulance service is doing with the Violence Prevention and Reduction Hub. So just, is there anything extra that you want to say about the refreshed violence prevention reduction standard that was introduced by NHS England and whether it has actually reduced violent incidents, whether you know at all whether it's had any impact? I don't know if anyone wants to say anything.
So I'll kick off. I mean, it certainly hasn't reduced violent. Has not, because we are seeing a year-on-year increase in incidents, and 5% more of our staff in 2024 compared to the previous year said they've been assaulted at work. We know nationally that there's been a 15% increase in violence and aggression reported against ambulance workers in the last 12 months. So there is no evidence to suggest there's been a slowdown or a decline in reported cases.
Although, could it be that there's just more violence that is being responded to, and that if that measure wasn't in place, it would be even worse?
That is true, and I think hard for us to evidence here this morning,
sure.
Certainly, but that could be the case. I mean, I don't think...
But it's not doing enough.
No, I mean, I don't think there's necessarily much more that the NHS could do. From a policy perspective, what this is about is twofold, I think, for us. One is when an episode of violence and aggression does take place, we need swift, proportionate justice to send a message to communities that this is not tolerated and act as a deterrent, and also then send a message to our people that the system, the judicial system, but society as a whole is taking this seriously. But that's, of course, as I touched on earlier, a response to an incident. Increasingly, I think we need to be moving into the prevention space, where we're working collectively, not just as employers and health organisations, but across a multi multidisciplinary approach to this with the CPS, with the court service, with police, with social care, with mental health, all sorts of other public sector agencies to get into the prevention space where we work together to act to reduce and stop the assault from happening in the first place rather than putting the focus on the response to it once it's occurred.
And that prevention, what does that actually look like in practice?
So, I mean, I would say there's a couple of things. On the kind of sentencing piece, I've kind of referenced this already, but there's use of existing powers that exist. In one of my other roles, I chair something called the Association of Ambulance Chief Execs, which is a membership body across the 4 nations of the UK for all the ambulance services. And one of the things we've done there is written to the 4 health ministers, seeking dialogue about what more from a government policy perspective could be done. One thing when you look internationally is that some states in Australia, for example, have a minimum mandatory custodial sentence for an assault against an emergency service or health worker. Now you say to yourself, okay, could that be something which we might want to think about here as an action to kind of more kind of a preventative action? There's something about restorative justice, I think, so that's about working with the offender once the incident has taken place to help them understand the impact on the individuals and therefore seek to prevent further reoccurrence. And there's definitely something about raising awareness of the issue and the impact on our people in society, our campaigns, again, acting as a preventative measure to say to people, this is just not okay, and we will push as hard as we can, for swift sentences. And of course, someone gets a custodial sentence, that's arguably a life-changing event for them, particularly if they're employed. So I think there's a range of things we need to be doing, but I would much rather focus our efforts, at least proportionally, across prevention and response, rather than all in the response space.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone want to add anything on that? Or yes.
So I completely agree with Jason. It's the action that'll kind of lead to prevention. But if you look at NHS Trust, I think you'll find in every single trust there will be a strap line for reduction of violence. So we would have Work Without Fear at Hearts Health. We have Choose Kindness at King's College Hospital. We've got Keep Our Staff Safe at Guy's and St Thomas's. So you will have all of this. So this is not. But actually, in reality, it's either not working or there's an increase. But what Jason has said, I think, will actually probably carry more weight.
Okay, thank you. And then there's the 2023 NHS Sexual Safety Charter, which was about helping to reduce incidents of harmful sexual behaviour against healthcare staff in London. So do you think that has been helping, or and is it in place in both in nursing and in ambulance settings?
So there are two responses to that. Internally, I think this has helped a lot. And what I mean by internally is by healthcare worker against the healthcare worker. I think that has worked. With members of the public, I'm not too sure, and I don't have enough lived experience or data to say otherwise.
Well, that's partly positive, so that's helpful to understand, Lisa.
I think the honest answer is we don't know, because I don't think there's any clarity in how we're holding NHS trusts to account for how they're adhering to the Charter at the moment. And actually what we'd like to see is how we're actually overseeing and reviewing the actions that trusts are taking, and how we can then share learning and best practice as well. So I think at the moment the simple answer is that this isn't we're not pulling this data and this information in a way that we can actually see the impact of these policies that are coming in.
Thank you. Lots of really, really helpful stuff there. Jason or Emily, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'll tackle it from the ambulance sector perspective. And again, Emily, may want to comment here about how it feels on the ground. I do think the Sexual Safety Charter has made a big difference internally. When you think about the organisation's culture and some of the challenges that we know we've had as a sector over many years, not dissimilar to other large organisations or private or public. We have seen increased reporting, increased action, increased confidence from staff to come forward and share their lived experience in the workplace, be that historical or current. And so I think it's made a big impact internally. I'm not convinced about the impact on public behaviour towards our people as a result of the Charter. I mean, yes, we need more data, but anecdotally, it doesn't feel like it's had an impact. But Emily may want to comment.
Emily.
Yeah, so from like an employer perspective, I would say nowadays I feel very kind of safe and comfortable that if I experience something at work, I can absolutely speak up and it will be taken seriously. On the road, my lived experience is, over the years, I've had many kind of sexual harassment, assault, unfortunately, at work, and I would say that has not reduced. I mean, obviously, the example that I gave earlier, that had a very sexual nature to it, and that unfortunately was not my only experience kind of since this, in recent years. I feel like if I get physically assaulted, it's more likely to carry weight for potential prosecution. I feel like sexual harassment, even if it's quite awful in nature, I don't feel like that can particularly be acted upon as much. I feel like if I get, sexually harassed verbally, it's a big deal, but it's almost not a big deal, if that makes sense.
And it really should be a big deal.
It should be a big deal.
It is a big deal.
There's only so much we can take.
And I'm really grateful to you being so open and sharing your experiences, because it's really, really important that we get some good recommendations and that the NHS listens. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, can I just follow up on one point? You talked about the Australian model there. Is there a big difference, and perhaps more in your background as a magistrate, is there a big difference in having a minimum sentence as opposed to continuing to raise a maximum sentence as has been done in the UK? Just a mic, sorry.
Thank you. I'll draw on 3 years living and working in Australia as well, from an experience perspective. So look, I do think there is a difference. I mean, when my experience in Australia was that, when an emergency worker, an ambulance worker was assaulted, the prosecution was more common, and sentence was more stiff, if I could describe it like that. Was firmer. I'll give you an example just to give you kind of a feel for what we experience here. So a couple of years ago, someone kicked through the window of a windscreen and threw bricks at the crew. Now, in this scenario, the crew weren't injured, but clearly a very violent event towards the crew. A fine of £114 and 150 hours community service doesn't feel proportionate to me for the level of violence which was demonstrated against our people. And that's just one example. So I think what I would say in response to the direct response to the question is, my instinct and experience tells me that in other jurisdictions, in other places, there is a tougher line taken against violence and aggression towards public sector workers. And whilst we need to be careful, and we always need to take into account all the circumstances of a particular event, I don't think the current sentencing regime is clearly not working. It's clearly not working. And so that's why we wrote to the 4 health ministers and said we really need to engage in a policy discussion here about an alternative approach, because we're seeing a continual rise rather than a stabilisation or a decline.
Thank you. Assemblyman. Oh, sorry, Emily, go.
Sorry, I just wanted to add with that. there's definitely an attitude on the road from people that are violent and aggressive towards us. There's a real attitude of like untouchable, if that makes sense. It feels like they know that people are often getting away with it, and they know that they can like play it off and things. And the man that I referenced earlier, who obviously he caused me quite a lot of distress, and I ended up off the road and in some therapy for a while. But there was this kind of real attitude from him where he was trying to get the police to get me to go and see him so he could apologise and think that that would be it. And this is like, I've had multiple experiences of them acting like they know that they'll get away with it, and I know that they'll probably get away with it as well. So I think that because they know that, they won't think twice as much before assaulting us. So I think what Jason said about if we had like a minimum sentence, and they know that actually if you do punch me, there's a high chance that you're going to prison, and like Jason said, your life will be altered. I think that would have a massive impact.
Thank you. Assembly Member Poff?
I think, to be honest, my question's been answered, but Mr. Killen said earlier that, I'll read you the question, but I think you answered it. Has the Violence Prevention and Reduction Hub been effective in reducing violence and abuse for London ambulance service staff? You seem to say a big no earlier.
I did say no. I think I'd just perhaps unpack it a bit if I could.
Okay.
So has the kind of, the NHS-wide policy position been effective in reducing incidents of violence and aggression? No. Has our own violence reduction unit led to a reduction in violence and aggression? No. But what it has done, what those approaches have done, is increase the support available to our people when an incident does occur. It gives us capacity to work much more closely with the police and the CPS in terms of a prosecution. And it has enabled us at a UK-wide level to share best practice across the ambulance sector. There are 13, 14 services across the UK. So it's much easier for us than the rest of the NHS to share stuff, what's working. And so we do frequently share not only data about prevalence, but also, interventions and action that people are taking across the ambulance sector, where there seems to be benefit. So I don't think we can directly point to an improvement in the situation as a result of violence reduction.
You wouldn't want it disappearing, though,
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
No, so this is not about the effect of... I mean, societal change doesn't happen in a week, and I'm assuming that this is laying the foundations for...
Yeah, this is a long burn, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've talked a bit about those committing violence, and I'm trying to think, is there a particular profile for the person that does this? Obviously, some things I've heard so far is mental illness or drugs and alcohol. Is there anything else in terms of, is it more often men than women? Is it all ages, or is this a younger generation or older generation? Is there any other particular profile, or is it just a cross-societal problem of this could come from anyone, or tends to be from anyone? Does anyone?
I mean, it can come from anyone, anywhere, at any time. And sometimes, often, it will present at an incident where we don't expect it to occur, and we see violence and aggression take place. What I would say, our data tells us that it's more likely to be men under 30, and there's more likely to be a presence of drugs and or alcohol. But beyond that, we haven't got any data that would be helpful, I don't think.
Yeah, again, we don't have the data, but from a hospital experience, verbal abuse is more likely to come from women, and physical abuse is more likely to come from men. There isn't a big age difference, I don't think, or age demarcation from a violence perspective, but yeah, generally verbal is women.
Thank you. And finally, just two final questions. I wanted to ask Emily and Jason the impact of the Work Without Fear campaign. Did either of you want to say anything about that, Emily?
I think, so the impact is kind of, from like an internal perspective with my colleagues, it's very positive. So obviously we did our Respect campaign, like Jason said earlier, over the winter, and like I already said, I had a lot of people reach out to me personally to speak about it. I think potentially from the public point of view, not so much. I think, you know, obviously the majority of our patients are nice. The majority of our patients are not assaulting us or abusing us. But those people are the ones that are seeing the campaign and being horrified about what's happening. I think that the people that are actually doing it are not the people that are like watching Good Morning Britain and seeing this effect that's happening. So I think, yeah, from like a morale perspective and, you know, increasing reporting is very positive. I'm not 100% convinced how much it will bring down the amount of abuse that we entail.
Thank you. And the final question from me to everybody on the panel is, as a result of this investigation, are there some recommendations that you would like to see us making, either to the Mayor, NHS or government? I'll start, Sabina, and just work down the line. And if it could be succinct, that would be appreciated.
I'll be very succinct. What Jason said in terms of policing.
Yeah, okay. Lisa.
I think I've got two asks really. One is that we make sure that this remains on the agenda, that we don't lose sight of this. And I also think there is looking at that sort of national framework and how we're going to oversee these incidents happening and learning and best practice. And then also having that bigger impact of the right person, right care policy as well.
Emily.
Yeah, I think for me, like Jason said, it feels that it's about making sure that people know that there will be a prosecution and making people think twice about the fact that if they assault me, it's a serious offence and not just brushed off.
Great, thanks. And Jason?
Thank you, Lynn. So just to wrap it up, Chair, so I think in terms of recommendations or how this committee could help, I'd ask, I think there's a role for the GLA and potentially the Mayor in this, in raising awareness of the issue on London's health workers, but more broadly public sector workers amongst our communities. And I do think there is something around how the CPS and the court service support us and health workers once an assault has taken place.
Brilliant. Again, once more, thank you all for taking time out of your very busy days to spend some time with us here. We really do greatly appreciate it, especially sharing such personal testimony for those that did as well. That is hugely valuable to the investigation and making people take this seriously. So thank you. We are now going to take a 7-minute break and be back at 11:35 for our second panel on violence against health workers. Welcome back to the Health Committee, and another warm welcome to our second panel of guests who join us today to discuss violence and abuse against healthcare staff in London. I'll start right to left, welcoming Andy Johnson, the Programme Manager for Health and Wellbeing from NHS England, Thomas Manu, Operational Support Service Officer from the Central London Community Healthcare NHS Trust, and to his left, Chris Akaluka, security guard with Unison. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you've taken out to be with us today. And if I could start with a similar question, I don't know if you managed to see our opening session, to your experiences with seeing violence within the NHS and whether you've seen that growing. I'll start from left to right. So Chris, did you want to start?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I have seen violence in so many forms in my 16 years working in the NHS as a security supervisor. Violence presents itself in 3 different ways. One is physical assault. And this physical assault could be in the form of spitting, slapping, kicking, punching, hitting, grabbing, all sorts of physical assaults. And it could be meted by patients or their relatives and friends on staff. The other one is assault. This is when patients and or their relatives and friends decide to hold all forms of abusive words on staff. And the last one is threat. Threat is when patients again and all their relatives decide to maybe shout aggressively or destroy things just to intimidate staff. And this happens all the time. So, thank you.
Chris, what NHS settings have you worked in?
I work in Bats Health NHS Trust, and my hospital precisely is Noam Healthcare Unit in Bradford. Noam University Hospital.
Is it in the emergency department?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And Thomas?
Right, so I've got... Oh, sorry. Oh, Hi, sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, thanks. Moved up a little bit. So I've got, I think, 20 years of experience this year of working with the NHS. Most of it's been mental health, and over the last few years I've moved into community health. So from that, there's been a massive increase, I think, year on year from my point of view, of violence and aggression. Like within, across the NHS from a global point of view, but within what I personally see, there's highly increase of patients just attacking staff, even patient-on-patient violence and relatives getting involved. Similar to what you were saying before, Chris, spitting, verbal insults, verbal threats in regards to that. So, yeah, I feel that increase year on year. And statistics are showing that as well.
Thank you. And Andy?
Good morning, everybody. So my experience I'm Programme Manager for Health and Wellbeing and Staff Experience and Engagement for the London region. So we deal with a more strategic implementation of violence prevention sort of strategies. But on a personal level, I'm a registered nurse, so I have seen it in the past myself, and hence my particular interest in the health and wellbeing and violence prevention sphere. So I've seen it when I've worked within acute NHS trusts. I've seen the impacts on other members of staff, but I've also experienced violence towards myself. And what we're seeing is an increase in those violence incidents. You know, I've been in the NHS for 16 years now, and there is an increase that we're seeing across the NHS.
Thanks. And you've all referenced the increase that you've seen over what has been a long duration in the service. Have you noticed anything as a result of the Right Care, Right Person initiative coming in? Or is there any feedback you would have on that? Thomas?
Yeah. My first thought is that, how can I put this? It needs to be a support across the board. And I mean, so all services from my point of view need to be working together to make sure that we're providing. So the police working with the local trusts and so on and so forth. So it's not put on one particular organisation.
Yeah, thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I agree with what he said. But again, there are 2 basic things that we need to understand here, that there are 2 two ways that violence happen. We have the external risk factors that lead to violence, those things that happen within the environment, for instance, in Newham Hospital, in Newham environment, Newham Borough. One thing that is unique is that knowing the socio-economic situation in Newham, you find poverty, you find mental illness, you find cultural and language barrier, you find things like poverty, you find things like homelessness, and all these other factors. Now, when they then come in and meet with what we call the internal factors again, where you come to the hospital, you have long waiting hours, you have poor communication, you have corridor care, you have things like people not getting the right training to deal with mental health related issues, because when a mental health patient comes to the hospital, if you are a frontline staff, i.e. you're booking the person in, you're the triage nurse, and again, in a general hospital like Newham, and you're the security guard or security officer dealing with it, if you're not trained to deal with mental health related issues, it will be a difficult thing because you may not understand what these triggers are. Again, if you look at some of the issues, when we talk about winter pressure, when it's cold, homeless patients migrate to A&E departments, and then the booking, they stay there, and when it's time for them to be discharged and leave, they find it difficult to leave because they have no place to go. So just that alone is a problem that also ends up causing violence. Another issue is about when the service is overwhelmed. Now, the cuts that are happening in the NHS, you have few staff doing too much. That leads to burnout. They're stressed, their well-being is affected, and as a result of this, they become irritable. There's a cultural issue as well. Some people, English is not their first language, and cultural issues. So if there is this lack of cultural awareness, cultural intelligence, it could also lead to a trigger. So there are so many factors. So yes, there may be right care, right person and all that, but there are environmental factors. These factors need to be tackled for this to work well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Andy?
I don't have a lot to add on this, I'm afraid. It's not something that we deal with within NHS England. This is more of an operational process.
Okay, I'm going to pass over to Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. It's really good to have you here. We heard in the previous session about underreporting of incidents, that people don't have the confidence to report, they don't have the confidence that issues are going to be dealt with seriously, and also that, you know, in the case of sort of serious physical assault, or serious sexual assault, that the Crown Prosecution Service doesn't necessarily take it particularly seriously, and prosecutions are quite rare. So do you have any views on why this underreporting of incidents is going on? I mean, obviously you can tell if people feel they're not being reported, not being taken seriously, you can see why that leads to fatigue with reporting things. But if we don't have the reports, then we don't have the data to be able to take action. So, Andy, did you want to start on that one?
Of course. So one of the issues with underreporting is potentially a cultural thing within the NHS. Historically, we've not reported incidents, potentially. We've also not had the reporting lines available, the avenues available to staff to be able to report in the right way. I still hear anecdotally staff who would like to use what we call the DATIC system. So that's a reporting system that NHS trusts tend to use for all sorts of incidents. But staff still think that that's the way they should be reporting. And there aren't that communication potentially, that there are other avenues that should be used and are better used to report incidents. I think reporting has improved, has increased following a lot of work over the last couple of years around sort of violence prevention, sexual safety. The staff survey certainly evidences that there are more reporting, the reporting has improved, but it can go a lot further.
Thank you. Thomas or Chris, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. Well, yes, there is the issue of underreporting. One of the factors that really discourages people from reporting is because we no longer have zero, there's nothing like zero tolerance anymore. And when you're in a hospital and the people, you're feeling attacked, and the attack is coming from patients who are really unwell, either they're going through mental health issues, dementia, learning disability, delirium, all sorts, and alcohol and substance misuse. And when sometimes police are informed about them, if police are called, they said, well, they're under the influence, or they don't have the capacity, and people feel that nothing is going to happen as a result of that. So that discourages individuals to think, well, why am I reporting? And since nothing will happen, nothing will be done. So, however, I work in a trust where they have a good policy. The policy encourages reporting. It is layered up with all different de-escalation methods, and then a way to also report and get support. It's in the policy. And staff are encouraged to report their DATEX. And we also have the Speak Up Guardian. If you feel that something is going on, you could talk to the Speak Up Guardian, you could talk to the trade union, such as Unison. And so these measures are all in place. But the problem is that sometimes the appetite to report, like Thomas said, culture. Sometimes people have this culture of underreporting, and they believe that nothing may come out of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, it's similar to what my two colleagues were talking about. There is a culture of not reporting due to the fact that they don't think there's going to be anything that actually comes out from it. Historically, it's throughout certain trusts, it's always been a thing where, fair enough, we're here to support you, but what happens outside of that are the consequences for the service user or patient, from a police point of view. Are the police going to follow it up? What type of support are they getting from other organisations to turn around and actually help that? It has changed slightly, and I will say that over the last 10 to 15 years, there has been a changing culture where trusts are now in a place where they feel that they can support their staff and from outside organisations to turn around and help prosecute the particular person if they have the capacity. But we need more. We need more. Staff need to feel like they can, they're here to work and provide the service, not here to be abused or attacked. And I think the problem is that historically it's always been a thing where, well, maybe it's part of the job. You get hit a little bit, but, don't worry about it because that's what the job's all about, which really scares me, being honest about it. The whole idea of that being considered normal, it's not. It's not, and it should never be. No one should ever think coming to work and being hit should be part of your job.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little bit passionate about that. Apologies.
So, this is very much exactly what we heard from the previous panel. And obviously it should not be a normal part of anyone's job to be hit. And if it is from someone who has dementia or doesn't have capacity to understand what they're doing, then the support mechanisms around that member of staff need to be really robust and caring. And one of the things we also heard from them was that there's very little data, that the trusts don't have, aren't reporting the data. They were sort of describing a kind of lack of a layer of scrutiny on how the trusts were managing this stuff. Is that something that you recognise?
Can I go first? Yeah, I think I'm lucky because I've worked for 3 different trusts, so I've got to kind of sit from not so much a global point of view, but a larger point of view. I don't see anything above that. So I don't know, just say that unless like trusts are interacting with each other, making a conscious effort, there isn't nothing from a global point of view, saying from a national point of view, this is what's going on.
So you mean there's no one kind of looking at the trusts and comparing them to each other and comparing their outcomes on looking after staff?
Yeah, and I may be wrong, but from what I've seen and stuff, like I can call certain trusts I know, or we're in community groups of practice and we have those conversations, but like I don't see it from I don't see one person, one organisation, or fact say, right, great, all of these trusts are doing that. This is happening or that's happening, unless the trust were actively made that effort.
And there's no sense of comparison between trusts in terms of their outcomes, in terms of protecting staff.
Everyone looks at stuff slightly differently depending on their needs or their outcomes and stuff. So it'd be good if we could say it if we had someone saying it from a global point of view.
Well, and some data.
Yes, from that.
Just
from
on
that, obviously.
Levels of reporting and
definitely.
outcomes as well, and types of episodes that get reported, just to be able to understand that. Andy, were you wanting to come in?
No, it's just going forward, we have the new staff standards. They hopefully will be published within the next month or so, being developed as Department of Health plus Social Partnership Forum. And that will be an adjunct to things like the Violence Prevention Standard, the Sexual Safety Charter, and the reporting that sits alongside that. And what I'm hoping is that will provide the accountability and that data being fed up as to what and that comparison across different trusts as to what the problems are. So that is something that has been highlighted, and I'm hoping that that accountability and that sort of looking at that data, it's going to change.
So the new staff standards are coming in across all trusts, is that right?
They are, yes.
And will that produce consistent data that can be, so the trusts can be compared?
It should do, yes. And the standards, covering sort of like when we're thinking about sort of health and wellbeing and staff experience, it will cover violence prevention, flexible working, sexual safety, and those sorts of things. And I suspect they'll be sort of published in blocks, so trusts will be able to work on those particular areas. But it should give that data and that sort of oversight from sort of ICB level and at sort of NHS England level to be able to look at where the gaps are from that point.
That sounds like a helpful step. So when do these new staff standards come in?
Hoping for them to be published around April. Well, that's the plan.
Okay. And they come into effect immediately?
They would, yes.
So the trusts would all now be preparing to kind of start reporting on the reports that they're receiving. And
they know these are coming. It was part of the 10-year plan, the health plan, so they're aware that these standards are coming down. So they should have already been gathering the data that they need to be able to evidence where their gaps are, what their action plans should be going forward, and provide that data that we need, and know where they need to improve.
Yeah. And do you know how frequently that data is going to be published and made available? Is it like 6 monthly, quarterly?
I'm afraid I don't have that information, but when I can get it, I can always come back to the committee and maybe let you know.
That would be really helpful, because I think it's we were hearing in the morning session about the importance of the ambulance services doing a lot of work to communicate with the public about the harm that is caused by terrible behaviour towards healthcare professionals, and trying to really make people more aware of it. Well, this data is also another way of telling that story and trying to actually get that cultural change and shift that's needed, where people start thinking, actually, it's not, you may be a bit drunk, but it's really not okay to sexually assault an ambulance worker. And it's kind of, just sort of all these parts of the jigsaw puzzle to kind of actually get that cultural shift. That sounds very helpful. Is there anything else you want to add on reporting structures to increase confidence about reporting violence and abuse?
Yeah, I just want to add to what Andy said about the data that is the standards that has been made mandatory. So because it's now mandatory for all trusts providing in all NHS contracts providing secondary care, they must report this. So they must be held accountable to make sure that their workplaces are safe. So, and it's something Unison did in partnership with the NHS England and the SPF, that is the SPF. So it would be lovely to refer to some of the recommendations that Unison has made with these NHS England, because that will give us a more detail about that. Because apart from being a security supervisor, I'm also a Unison Health and Safety representative, and I'm also a branch secretary. So Unison has done a great work. So I think that would help putting together and understanding the time frame, what is expected. And you see, different trusts have been doing different things, but this would help to glue it all together to make sure that they're accountable and there are standard data that anybody can refer to. Thank you.
So certainly it would be really helpful to have the Unison recommendations sent through. But I think also that's really, I think, yes, it's encouraging that this work and thinking is going on, because it sounds, from what we heard in our first session, like it's very much needed. But back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And Chris, just to follow up, something I'm really interested in is, in your role, where is the line for calling the police? And do you think that you are adequately supported to do so, or is there a culture perhaps of you're here to deal with that, you don't need to, make a big deal and have the police? Or a crime is committed, but now that person's calmed down, do you just, and they're with Chris, so let them calm down, but no, actually the police need to be called? Is that balance right?
No, the idea is when these things happen, security is called in the first instance, and then they will look at it. Sometimes you do your risk assessment and you think that, oh, we can't deal with this, you call the police. But the problem is that sometimes their response is amazing, sometimes they're busy. So you would then have to deal with it. And the issue again is there are some things by law that the security would have to deal with in the hospital. So if, for instance, somebody is presenting with mental health and all the rest of them, sometimes they are presenting with, you can't remove them from the premises because they're in a place of safety. You can't, because they're patients, they're getting treated. So because there isn't any zero tolerance anymore. But if it is their relatives, yes, you can remove them. If they're discharged patients, you can remove them. But sometimes it's difficult. If somebody's presenting with dementia, learning disability, and all that, so it's hard. Even when you call the police, and you have to then double up and still look after these individuals. One of the major things that we really need to do is to equip security and all frontline staff who deal with these staff with the right support, the right training. Because sometimes you need de-escalation. The staff booking in the patient would know at what point to de-escalate issues, at what point to call security, at what point to know even when police needs to be called. But if they are not trained, or even when they're trained, they're not properly supervised to know when to do this, it could also become a problem. Sometimes security will be called in, the issue has escalated and degenerated. So everything falls on security. That's the truth about the whole thing. Security plays a vital role in the NHS that nobody even sees, because most hospitals can't function without them. It's that bad. They pick up whatever issue, remove this patient, do this, do that. It's security. So the training, the support is very important. And then abuse as well. Some people internalize their abuse. Even security, they get assaulted, they get punched, and they still take it. Because, again, they feel in the first instance it's their role. And so it's a difficult situation. So we need collaboration with the police. We need to make sure that they understand where we stand, because some of them are difficult situations to deal with, because if they are unwell, and if like, for instance, there's this we call trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care gives you an opportunity to understand this patient a bit more so that you understand the reasons that is causing their violence. But trauma-informed care could be a bit difficult in a fast-paced area like accident and emergency, because you may not have that time to really study this person and know the kind of care they need. So that, again, is a problem. But that is one of the approaches to dealing with this issue. So some of these things need to rejigging to understand exactly how they can work. So security is at the short end of the stick. So sometimes you deal with it, sometimes you get support from the police. But more training to support these issues are required for all staff.
So I hear you right that sometimes the police say they're not going to come. In some instances, when you ask them to come, they say no.
Yes, sometimes they tell you you deal with it.
Okay.
Sometimes they tell you it's your duty to deal with it. Sometimes, or else you then tell them, look, it's becoming very difficult, the person is breaking everything, and then they'll come down. So what we're doing now is to work in partnership with the police. We're now creating forums where we can sit and have a conversation so that everybody can understand what to do. So, and we have a clear escalation process, and we want staff to understand what these escalation processes are. And most importantly, de-escalation. Because if staff, frontline staff, are trained to de-escalate, to now know when, and for instance, cultural intelligence, given that our area is culturally diverse, and if the staff who is dealing with these patients are a bit well-trained or vast in cultural intelligence, you will now know that, okay, this conversation is getting a bit concerning. When do I then escalate? When do I call security? And all the rest of them. So training is very vital.
Thanks. Just on that cultural intelligence, I think just to put people's mind at ease, so that doesn't mean ever that we give in to the violence of, he's trying to de-escalate. So, for example, if someone's being racially abusive, would you say, well, we'll make sure they're only seen by white staff. If somebody is from an South Asian heritage and wants only we wouldn't actually give in to the abuse in being culturally.
Nobody should be made to face any form of violence and abuse. Nobody. It's unacceptable. The only concern is that some people who are the patients who are perpetrating this violence, for some reasons, can't be prosecuted, can't be dealt with at that moment because they are not doing it in their right frame of mind, because they're unwell and all the rest of them. However, I must say that my trust is committed to prosecuting any individual who is willfully doing what they're doing. So we have a very good policy. We have like I said, we have all these things, but we think that a bit more needs to be done. So the grey area are those those patients who are doing what they do as a result of them being unwell. So that's the difficult part. Yeah. But it's unacceptable to accept for anybody to be racial towards anybody. Cultural intelligence is not to internalize racism. No, it's for members of staff to understand the layers of cultures that are within the environment.
And you mentioned the prosecutions. Have you heard of successful prosecutions? Are you happy with that? That's something we heard in the first panel.
I have been, personally, I have had 7 assaults on me in my entire career. And those 7 assaults were all taken to court, and those individuals were either fined. And I can tell you since I've been there for 16 years. So that is something I know that the trust has always done. But the difficult part that we've had are those ones that we cannot do anything about because they don't have the capacity to be prosecuted.
Thanks. Thomas, Andy, did you want to add anything?
In terms of the prosecutions, statistics have shown there has been an increase and stuff, and it varies throughout the parts of London, but trusts over the last 10 to 12 years have made a conscious effort to prosecute people who have the capacity. So patients who have the capacity. Obviously, if you don't have the capacity, that's another area. But that has been increased. I feel like there needs to be more, and it's just because there's still that aspect of culture saying that, well, you know what, it's part of the job, and it's just. And you mentioned training and education, just educating and trying to change the culture. So that look, do you know what, the police are there to help. It's about also educating the police and showing them how we're seeing it from our point of view, and getting them to help us and support us in that factor.
Thank you, Andy.
The only thing I'd like to add is, there was quite a dip, if I'm honest, in support from Met Police a few years back. They have their own challenges, obviously, and withdrew some of the support that they were giving to trusts within the London region. A lot of trusts previously had a liaison officer, so they had somebody specific that they could talk to around sort of these issues, and that did dip down for quite a period of time. That's the evidence that I gathered within sort of the work that I've been doing. But over the last couple of weeks, we've heard that the Met Police have started reintroducing those roles. So having more support available and a local sort of representative for maybe a particular area or ICB to sort of support trusts and address some of the issues. So there has been a little bit of a turn and in availability of Met Police to support our trusts. And one of the things, so I run a violence prevention community of practice for the London region, and it's one of the things we are going to be looking at is how we can, ask Met Police to come and be a part of that community of practice, so they can understand specifically the issues and hear them from a London-wide perspective, and how they can actually support, what gaps are there, and how they can support our trust. So it's actually having that conversation and an open conversation, not individual conversations with individual trusts. It's how we can have conversation together.
Thanks. And if you could send through any of that evidence you've collected on the liaison officers, that'd be really interesting. Thank you. Assembly Member Boff.
There's the violence prevention reduction standard was refreshed in 2020, it was introduced in 2020. Has it helped to address violent incidents against staff? Mr. Akaluka.
Well, yeah, the standard was introduced in 2021 and refreshed in 2024. Again, it gave us some, like the NHS approach, the public health approach. So we look at the trauma-informed care and all that. So some of these things, the trauma-informed care works if the patients are in a ward. So it takes time to study, understand them, and give them the right support they need. But again, I would say it has helped. I would say the standard has helped. But they're making it mandatory now for all caregivers, or all secondary NHS, in the contract of all secondary NHS staff. It is important, it will help, it's mandatory, there will be data, because most of the times when we talk about violence, it's hard to really pin it down. We could be saying that, and trust, I'm sure we're not mandated to collect the data they need, but now it is compulsory. So I think it will help. It actually gave the system a bit of structure. Introducing it, the standards gave it a bit of structure, but making it mandatory now will give it more bite. So, and this is where the trade unions as well come into play, because the trade union, like Unison, we play some sort of, because when we work in partnership with the trust or the individual trust, we help in shaping the policies, holding them accountable, and making sure that what is in these standards are also implemented. So I think it will go a long way into making things work.
Mr. Mann?
Hi, thank you. No, it's definitely what helped and stuff. It's created structure, and I think that's what's been needed. And with that, trust can turn around and look at their policies and make sure they're in line. So, I can keep on talking about. I'll just be saying the same thing as Chris. So it's giving structure.
No, that's fine.
Thank you,
Ms. Johnson.
With violence prevention reduction standards, I think it's really important that trusts actually use it within or have an approach where it's not maybe just a tick box exercise. And I think this will work really, really well once we've got the staff standards as that sort of regulatory element on top. So now we have got that mandated element as part of the standard contract. I think trusts will take it that little bit more seriously. They will have action plans coming out of what is missing from the standard. And where it's been updated, we've got that RAG rating element, which helps. Obviously, it highlights where there are big gaps, but also it gives an opportunity where things have been rated as green within their assessments, their initial assessment, and of which there are 43 indicators. So it's a lot of evidence. Those green elements, they become the best practice that we can then collaborate and share with other trusts. So where trusts are getting it right, we can share that evidence. And I think that's where it will really work, is we can have that evidence, what works, what doesn't, what we can, expand across the region. I think that's the important part of the standard.
And how about the Sexual Safety Charter that's been around since 2023? What effect has that had?
So the Charter, allow me, it's recently been updated. I think it's still, although it was sort of published with it in 2023, I think there's a degree of infancy with it. But it has been ramped up over the last sort of 12 months, and particularly in light of things like staff survey results. It was quite evident that there is a increase in sexual assaults and an increase in reporting, which is a good thing, that we're seeing more people willing to report it, whereas previously we didn't see those reports. And that comes out of things like the Sexual Safety Charter. But also, I mean, there's been an update December. I think there's really important updates on the Sexual Safety Charter and preventing sexual misconduct within the NHS. So it's important. I think trusts have to, and you'll have to bear with me while I read the information. So they have to have investigation training in place for minimum. So chief people officers have to nominate 2 people to have specific sexual misconduct investigation training, and then that's a train-the-trainer approach. So they can then have other members of staff within trusts who can then investigate incidents, but there's also a need for special investigation of investigators, so specialists within each trust. So that's one of the new things. So it's not just signing up to a charter, we will stop doing these things, we will investigate such and such. It's actually they will have specialists within each trust to be able to look at those incidents, which is really important. And adding in things like chaperoning for sort of when it's dealing with patients, for example, increase in chaperoning and referrals to disclosure and barring service panels, that's really important. So it's been improved. Obviously, having the charter has improved reporting. It's highlighted the issues a lot more, and trusts are, really putting the work in to make change. And we have staff survey results being published. They're publicly published in a week or so. So then we'll be able to see what difference that has truly made now.
Mr. Mallory, have you seen an increase in reporting as a result of that charter policy?
Yes, I have. We have seen a report in we have seen an increase in reporting and stuff, and it's similar to what I was saying before with the violence and aggression. It's given a level of structure so people feel comfortable and a bit more supported. The fact that they can report in that. So, like I said, there has been an increase.
Thank you. Mr. Akaluk, what about yourself? Do you run against this charter because you're very front-facing? Yes. Do you encounter this charter?
Yes, I think the charter has been helpful. It's given the whole system a structure. People can speak up a lot more, unlike before. So sexual safety was an issue that was not openly discussed. Now, people can freely say how they feel and then raise concerns when they are worried. They can contact, even we have signposting. The chaperone policy, we have a chaperone policy in our trust. So it's also important because of this charter, people are now aware and people are more conscious when you're doing whatever thing you're doing, we bear that in mind. So we have the Speak Up Guardian, we have the trade unions, we have HR, we have all the lines of escalation when people feel that they have concerns. Initially, they were not there. So sexual safety is, and again, the awareness is that anybody can be sexually assaulted, anyone. So that has made it very clear and it's made people free and open to speak up when they feel concerned. Yes, it's working.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Harani.
Thank you, Chair. Just turning to Andy for this question about the NHS and how it's supporting staff, mental and physical health in response to incidents of violence and abuse.
So different trusts will have different things that they might want to do. A lot of them, obviously, one of the most important things is immediate acknowledgement of the incident. That's one of the bit of evidence around that's one of the most supportive things that you can do for a member of staff is acknowledge the incident straight away. So there's obviously support from manager or other senior member of staff. Ability to report is obviously very, very important, but having that layers of support around that person immediately. And that, there are things like employee assistance programs, but they always seem a sort of step outside. But it's important to have that restorative practice element. So supporting staff to understand what's happened to them, why a patient might have been, or a visitor, whoever may have been the perpetrator, understand why something has happened, but that there is a process going forward of sort of justice, whatever that might look like, and that they are involved within that process as they go down the road. But they have to have that support. That's that health and well-being support is probably the most important element that trusts are putting in place.
Okay. And would that support extend to third-party contracted staff? So where trusts had, for example, a third party supplying their security arrangements or cleaners or catering staff, or was that left to the employer directly?
I mean, that would be, I would assume, I mean, I could probably actually go to my colleagues here as they are working within trusts, and they might be able to answer that question a little bit better, but I would hope that it was.
Yeah, so I will ask you, but maybe in a different way. So do you feel that those that may be employed by third-party contractors support in a different way to NHS directly employed staff?
From trusts I've worked at and my current trust and stuff, if you work for the trust, third party or not, and you're attacked or abused, you need support, is provided in some form or another.
Okay.
That I think it should be.
Good. Chris?
Fortunately, my own trust, all services like Soft FM are in-house. Security is part of the trust. So, however, we do have some services that, like the canteen service. So they have their own policies and procedures. But if that happens on the premises, it's also escalated. We have a violence prevention committee, so that would immediately respond. So that service is there to make sure that such issue doesn't exist, or when it does, how to support them.
Okay, good. No, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Chair. So this is about resourcing for security teams so that it's possible to deal with the rising number of incidents that we're hearing about in the NHS. So we've to understand that 44% of security professionals working in healthcare have cited budget restraints as having an impact on the ability to deal with security issues. And also that officers are often expected to assist with high-risk restraint situations and respond to lone worker alarms across a really large hospital estate. And also there's the whole piece of liaison with law enforcement. So just, yes, do you think that security within the NHS is sufficiently resourced to deal with these rising incidents of violence?
You want to say? Okay. Honestly, they are not. The security is one team in the NHS that I think should be looked at again. I think that the role of security should be changed to maybe NHS constables, because they would have more powers to arrest, more powers to support, and it will help them have the right training, like the police. It would then reduce reliance on the police. So a lot in the NHS centers on security, because you can't have a good service, you can't look after patients, you can't deal with that. If they're disruptive, you would need security to deal with it. So the role of security has always been treated as a second fiddle, in the sense that it's not taken as part of the team. So I think that it needs to be looked at again. And the role of security should be looked at as something that can bring a lot of stability in the system, because they deal with conflict resolution, they deal with alarms, they deal with issues, they protect staff, patients, and their relatives while on the premises. So they do quite a lot. So I don't think they're well-resourced to deal with these issues, and I think a lot more investment needs to be put into the security team to support them. Thank you.
And that would support the nursing staff to be able to concentrate on delivering
so true, yes,
health outcomes for
yes, and
for
there's also
patients.
one other thing that is important. They tend to use security to support mental health patients, and that is a bit concerning because you don't have the training.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that you overuse them and undertrain them to bring them up to speed. So that's why I think they need to look at the role of security again.
Yeah. And that actually flows out from right person, right care, where
Yes.
the police have extracted themselves correctly from mental health cases, and we heard from the ambulance service they thoroughly supported it, but that but then you need more resource within the healthcare setting to be able to deal with people who may be violent or may pose a risk of violence. Thomas, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, training and resources. Those are two
I'm
things to
but
put
just about to come on to training.
Go.
So, Andy, did you have anything on the overall funding situation of security?
I'm afraid that's not something I can answer. It's
Don't
out
worry.
of my
In which
realm.
case, I will move on to talk about the training. So the question is: do you think there is sufficient training to deal with the emerging threats to staff safety? In particular, things like conflict resolution, prevention and management of violence and aggression, and also something called breakaway training.
Yeah.
Sessions to provide defensive techniques for disengagement. So, yes, Thomas, you get started.
No. Straight up, there isn't enough. There isn't enough.
Yeah.
Depending on what trust you go to or throughout the country and stuff, it varies. It varies depending on teams and what organisation the trusts are associated with. If security is in-house or out of house, there's conflict resolution training, there's breakaway training. You talked about trauma-informed care. There's training in regards to that, but it's not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like, if you're security and you're dealing with, mental health, do you have some training in regards to that?
Mm.
And I think that's the concern. There isn't enough training. There isn't enough resources in regards to it.
And do you have access? Because in the ambulance service, they have access to vehicles where there's someone from the mental health team who goes out with an ambulance worker, and they go out not in an ambulance, but in a vehicle to the person's home or wherever it is that the call is being made.
Mental
from.
health first aid workers in some form or another. There is access to that in some parts, but it's not consistent. And I think that's the thing. In pockets around London, there's some organisations doing some great work, but across the board it's not consistent. Depending on what trust you work for or where you're located will vary with terms of resources you have.
Okay, so that lack of consistency in the availability of mental health.
Yeah.
Mental health first aiders.
But first aiders.
Cool. Chris, did you want to?
Well, I just want to say that luckily in our own trust, we do not escort mental health patients outside the premises or go to their homes. But the problem is that our hospitals are general hospitals. They're not mental health hospitals, but it's so inundated with mental health issues. So, and because we don't have that training, it makes it a lot difficult. It's just, there is this experiment done with body-worn cameras, and you're told body-worn cameras de-escalate incident. Yes, on a normal situation where people are conscious of what they're doing, when you wear body-worn camera, when they know that they're being filmed, it will de-escalate it. But when people have mental health issues, they're not aware of what's happening around them. Sometimes it becomes a trigger, because to them, so that's why so the only thing body-worn camera deals with would do for a security staff when dealing with mental health or somebody who has mental health challenges would be to record the situation, to have a documentary of what's happening. But will that deter the crime or the incident from happening? No. So you would then rely on your de-escalation. Your de-escalation technique would be physical intervention, because sometimes they don't listen or wouldn't understand. But imagine if security staff are given the right training. Sometimes you may not even need to engage physically. Maybe something you say and they would listen. So that's why I think that because the general NHS is overwhelmed with mental health issues now in the community, so it is important to equip security to deal with this. And another thing they can do to reduce the surge of mental health patients coming to general hospitals would be to revamp the community services where people presenting with mental health issues can go there and make sure that their mental health issues are treated. I'm not saying that if they have a general issues, they shouldn't come to the hospital, but when there's that constant check to make sure that when they come to hospitals, there won't be much trigger. So that's some of the things. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, do you have anything to add on training?
Only a couple of things. So I think, the emphasis really does need to be on prevention, so preventative skills and de-escalation skills. But trusts need to think about, what are the training needs for their individual trusts? You can't have a one-size-fits-all, so you can't necessarily, let's just bulk buy in some sort of restraint reduction technique training, because that may not be appropriate for every trust. So it's very important that each trust thinks about their own training needs analysis, focusing on that. While you could have potentially bulk buy across different types of organisations or organisations within the same type, but actually you can't necessarily have a mental health trust having the same type of training package as, say, a community healthcare provider. So it's really important that we're not just lumping everything together. And also there's been a sort of move towards a lot of e-learning, and that doesn't necessarily suit everybody. They don't necessarily learn anything specifically if you're doing e-learning. If I'll be honest, I'm an educator, it's one of the things that we note is that e-learning is not for everybody. It can be learned by rote. So you actually need training that is in-person, opportunities for that in-person, which has a cost attached to it. It's of a higher cost. But is that a worthwhile investment?
Well, as someone who doesn't do very well with e-learning, I'm all for face-to-face training. Chris?
Just to add to what Andy said, I believe that tailored training is important. If you remember when I said I talked about external factors, those external factors, the environmental factors that affect the environment where the hospital is located, that will determine the kind of training that is required. For instance, like I said, Newham Hospital, you have a high case of mental health issues, people, drug and alcohol misuse and all that. So that would inform the kind of training in the area. So I agree with Andy. Training should be tailored down to suit the environment where the hospital is located. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And I don't know, actually, if any of you will know the answer to this in too much detail, but do you know the security budget for the hospitals? Is that directly from the hospital's budget?
Yes, it is from the trust, yes.
Okay. Because again, I suppose, should it be separated? Because I suppose if security and violence issues are growing, that places quite a conundrum on hospitals as to whether to expand their security funding, but obviously that would be at the loss of something else.
I totally agree with you. I think security needs to be reviewed as a service in the NHS. I think this is the time to look at maybe looking at the realities of our time and see how security can be revived to accommodate the realities of what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And you've already spoke about it yourself a bit. The fact body-worn cameras being effective as a deterrent. Is there anything else that either you, Chris, or anyone else on the panel wanted to add as to whether they think they're an effective deterrent? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's early days. I know the London Ambulance were here before, and they're doing a lot of work in regards to this. And they've talked about their research, some of the research they've been doing, and saying that it has been a bit of a deterrent in the sense where they've had the camera, they've highlighted to the perpetrator that no, we're switching this on. The perpetrators been able to be de-escalated or answer questions or change their behaviour in regards to it. And my trust is having conversations about that now, because our staff have been answering questions and saying if it's needed, if it's needed, if it's wanted, will it work? Will it deter people? And having those conversations now, because it's something that other organisations are starting to use now across the board, well, especially the London Ambulance, and people are taking note of that.
I don't want to make you speak for your entire department, but is it something that you would want to wear or feel comfortable or think would be a step too far?
I think I've got a level of confidence in myself where, and this is really bad to say, that I'm pretty comfortable de-escalating most situations. Would I be comfortable wearing it? I wouldn't be afraid to wear it, because, you know, evidence-based in terms of what actually happened can be filmed. It's documented rather than a he say, she say type scenario there. So from an evidence point of view, like I said, I'm not pro or against it. I'm still in two minds. I think time will tell.
Okay. So the pilot's helpful, I suppose, in looking at what the London Ambulance Service finds, yeah. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that in 2024, I did a postgraduate in Liverpool John Moores University, and one of my project topic was analysing the impact of body-worn cameras and the culture of best practice on the prevention and reduction of mental health-related incidents in the Accident and Emergency Department of Newham University Hospital, part of Barts Health NHS Trust. And the idea was to look at the effectiveness of body-worn camera. And yes, it does deter violence when the individuals who are perpetrating violence are conscious of what they're doing. So when you turn on the camera, it will deter them. But does it really deter violence when you're dealing with mental health-related incidents, people with dementia, individuals with learning disability and all that? Well, a lot more research needs to be done in that area, because my findings doesn't support that. So, but would I say that we discard that? No. I think it's important because, like I said, it plays double role. When the individual is aware of what they're doing, then it can de-escalate violence. When they are not aware of what they're doing as a result of their conditions, then it becomes a tool to record what's happening so that there will be evidence is gathered. So I think it's something I can encourage, but individuals should know how to use it, and data collected from these recordings must be stored effectively. Thank you.
Yeah, and has it ever helped? Thomas mentioned this in the he said, she said, because you've mentioned yourself, unfortunately, being assaulted 7 times. Yes. Has anyone never, as part of their evidence, tried to say, oh, well, he grabbed me and hit me and that's why I did that, and actually the body-worn camera nowadays would absolve you, would show that you didn't do any of that. So is that also a factor that you think is important?
Yeah, I think it's important because in the days I was assaulted, there were no body cameras. There were actually CCTV cameras everywhere, but then the importance of body-worn camera is that it records voice. So it can record voice. However, the disadvantage where a lot of people don't wear it is it can also be used against you. Because if you then, in the process of trying to do your job and you're using rare techniques and all that and saying the wrong things, it could be used against you. So, but do I think the body-worn camera is an essential tool? I think so. I think it's important, but is it a one-stop shop that you get the whole thing you're looking for? No. I think you should go with body-worn camera, de-escalation techniques, and every other tool that you need to de-escalate conflict. Physical intervention, conflict management, and breakaway training. So that should be part of the many ways they should complement each other. Thank you.
And Andy, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Just around, I don't know what LAS sort of spoke about. I should have been up there, so I could have heard it all, shouldn't I? But I mean, one of the things is within the LAS pilot, sort of it's voluntary usage, and it sits around 30%. And staff still feel, and there's a cultural issue there, still feel that the footage might be used punitively. So against them, whether it be within an incident or because it might be a HR-related thing. So they're worried that it might be, accessed for other things around performance management or anything like that. So there's still sort of that cultural element. People don't necessarily want to use it. And there's practical things around body-worn cameras. It's not going to suit every uniform, unfortunately, because they are quite weighty. And one of the things is actually switching them on in the right moment. So if you want to capture, like you mentioned, such and such hit me first, and having that sort of backwards and forwards, who said, who did, kind of argument, you've got to be able to switch the camera on at the right moment to capture. So there's some quite sort of almost logistical details around having body-worn cameras. There's no clear evidence on a reduction in violence necessarily. Obviously, the pilot's been going on for 5 years, but we've seen an increase in reporting of violent incidents. But that increased reporting has sort of shown that there's a behaviour change. So when the camera is there, somebody who's maybe would have started being aggressive or whatever reaction within sort of some form of transaction with a healthcare provider, they're less likely. It just reduces part of that de-escalation process. It really helps in de-escalation just having the camera there. That's one of the things that's been noted, not just in the LAS pilot, but also work that South London and Maudsley have done. They've done some research around body-worn cameras as well. And West London NHS Trust, they also use them. It's blanket policy that all of their staff have the cameras, and they found that it's just that sort of automatic deterrent, and it helps reduce potential. It's decreasing the risk of having aggressive incidents start in the first place. And patients actually, I think around 80% of patients said that they appreciated having the cameras there, the opportunity for somebody to record. They felt safer as well. That's quite interesting, because we should be thinking about the patient as well.
That's really interesting, because perception as well is almost as important as reality in terms of how safe people feel in our hospitals. Was there anything else on the body-worn cameras? No? Okay. I want to, we're kind of hurtling towards a conclusion, so I want to again thank you all for taking this time. And I think I can speak for the whole committee in saying we've been really horrified to hear the accounts of what you go through doing the essential work to keep people healthy in the capital. And just before you leave, I'll go down the line starting with you, Chris. If there was one thing you wanted us to say as a recommendation out of this report to the Met, the Mayor, the government, what would your one recommendation, or two or three recommendations, whatever they may be?
Okay. Violence is a disease. And I think that for us to fight violence, it's not just one agency approach. There's a multi-agency approach, both external and internal. But for people who work in the NHS, I think that we need to review the role of security and front row staff by making sure that the right training and support and resource is made available so that they can meet the present day challenges in dealing with issues in the NHS. My recommendation, security should be we should look at making them hospital constables that will give them the power to arrest with the right training so that they can also relieve the police from the stress that they're going through. Thank you.
Training and resources. Those are the two things that always pop out to me in regards to this stuff. But making sure that training is right for the organisation. I mean, you mentioned about not blanket training, and it's completely right. Training being customised or bespoke for the organisation. I think those are the two things. I'll make it short and sweet. Thank you.
I think it's really important that when we were talking about governance and accountability and that data that we come in, that is acted upon. Now we have things, within the standard contract that what is the outcome, what is the I've lost the word. If a trust isn't meeting their requirements as part of the standard contract, what is the consequence of that? And I think with these issues where our staff are at risk, it's really important that there is some form of consequence.
Right, brilliant, thank you. I think that nicely encapsulates a lot of what we heard on the first panel and your panel today. So my many thanks once again for taking the time to come and see us today. Chris, you said you're in Newham, so probably not too far, but thank you all the same. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
So can I thank the guests and conclude our discussion on violence and abuse against healthcare staff in London? Can I ask all the committee to note today's discussion? And can we delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group leads to agree any output from the discussion? Thank you. And can we note the committee's work programme and additional activities undertaken since the last meeting, namely the site visit and informal roundtable meetings to support the rapporteurship on enabling community use of sports facilities to support exercise and reduce health inequalities for young people? That was noting. Yeah, thanks. And the date of the next meeting will be in May 2026 and decided when we agree the committees for the 26-27 Assembly year. Going forward. Noted. And I have no urgent business, so therefore we can declare the meeting closed.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand